Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Grand Cruise Astrology. My name is Clayton Cruz, and this video today I'm going to talk about the new moon that we have in the sign of Cancer. It's going to be a new moon on July 20th, which is Monday, depending on where you are in the world. That may be a little off, but anyway. So we have a new moon coming up. It's in the sign of Cancer. This is the second new moon in the sign of Cancer, and as astrologers like to call it, it's a black moon or a dark moon. It just means that it's the second new moon in the same sign. And so with the first new moon that we had in the sign of Cancer, that was back on June 21st, and it was at 0 degrees of Cancer with a north node eclipse. And so very powerful new moon that was, and that moon represented some very raw, unfettered, newborn like energy, very powerful. With that eclipse, that north node eclipse, bringing in just this rush of energy coming through the dragon's head, which I call the north node, which is just an influx of energy coming into 0 degrees Cancer. So that lunar cycle was very powerful, and it was driven by this seed of raw emotion, very new. Cancer is a cardinal sign, and so it has to do with new beginnings and creation. So you could think of 0 degrees of the cardinal sign Cancer is like the point of conception, right? It's very new. It's like a newborn. It's just this energy that is just expressed with unfettered, without time or experience or maturation. It's just pure potential, right? And so that's what we had. It was very, in a lot of ways, very exciting, very emotional, very emotionally expressive, and very innocent in a lot of ways, but also a little immature, a little naive. I mean, you think about 0 degrees and think about a newborn, an infant, very infantile energy. So had a lot of hope and promise and a lot of maybe even excitement in some ways, but it wasn't developed, right? It didn't have that the development of time and experience to go with it. And it was also quincunx to the planet of Saturn. So Saturn was at 0 degrees of Aquarius at the time. And so Saturn, just like the moon rules Cancer. So the moon is very powerful in the sign of Cancer. 0 degrees Cancer, it's very powerful, especially with an eclipse. It's this bursting out of newness, this birthing, right? And so we had that energy, and we also had Saturn at 0 degrees of its home sign of Aquarius, and Saturn was moving backward. And so a quincunx is either 150 or 210 degrees, depending on which way you slice up the pie astrologically. And so what it represents is an angle of disconnect. Two energies that are not seeing one another and are not accounting for one another at all. So it was a situation where you had this 0 degrees energy, this 0 degree expression in the sign of Cancer, Cancer energy, which is very emotional, instinctual, caretaking, maternal, lunar, right? And so you had that energy and just this bursting forth of pure potentiality and expression, right? Without Saturn in its sight, there was absolutely no concept for putting any thought into anything. That wasn't really, this energy was outside of thought. It wasn't connected to thought. It wasn't connected to time. It wasn't connected to limitation. These are all Saturn words. Saturn is about boundary, restriction, time, reality, 3D, right? And so when you had Cancer at 0 degrees expressing itself, it wasn't accounting for what Saturn was doing in the sign of Aquarius. Saturn in Aquarius was creating a cool, detached, sort of utilitarian framework for a larger group, right? Larger group mentality, group think. the collective, right? That in forward thinking, forward pushing, but very cool and very detached. Whereas over here, and the new moon eclipse in the sign of Cancer, it was like very attached, very subjective. Whereas Saturn in Aquarius is very objective and detached. The moon in Cancer is very subjective and attached. Attached. It is not so independent as Saturn and Aquarius. It is more dependent. It provides care and demands it of others as well. It goes both ways. It gives and it seeks to receive, and so it's very connected, and it's very uh, it's very intuitive and emotional in its outreach and its relations with one another. And so we had these two energies that I'm describing doing their own thing. They're not seeing each other. And whenever you have a quincunx in a chart, the key word is adjustment, is what astrologers use to describe how you deal with that. Now, you just have to adjust that these two energies are not going to see each other. They're not going to connect. There's no middle ground. They just exist in their space, and you have to account for both of them, whether it's in the collective, in the world, or whether it's things coming up internally inside of you, whether it's your thoughts and emotions. That could be the disconnect there internally, how that could look. But lunar cycles, they are they're monthly, and we look at them kind of in a day-to-day sense. And so this is an energy that lasts for years and years. This comes and goes. And so now we have another new moon in the sign of Cancer, and this one's at 28 degrees. And so just on the face of it right there, we're seeing that Cancer has moved out of that pure potentiality of the 0 degrees Cancerian energy, which is very new, beginning. It's the baby being birthed, and now we're moving to 28. This is more like, I want to say, like an emotional maturity, right? It's like there's a wisdom to it because it's the later degrees. It has experience. It's still lunar in its nature, and it's still very connected to intuition and feeling and instinct, right? But it has the wisdom of experience of that 28 degrees to go with it, right? It's not completely infantile in its expression, right? It has some boundary of experience, and so I say that because now also, I mean, talking about the maturity of it, now its relation to Saturn is, it still has that connection to Saturn. This time it's not a quincunx. This time it's an opposition, right? So I said the quincunx is about two energies that don't see each other, that are acting on their own behalf without considering the other. An opposition is two energies that are right in each other's path. They're right in front of each other, staring right directly at each other. They see each other now. Saturn and the moon are both going to be, Saturn at 28 degrees Capricorn and the moon at 28 degrees Cancer. They're seeing each other now. They are right in each other's sight. We're talking about a new moon in Cancer. We're talking about a seed of expression. So a new moon, it's dark. It has pure potentiality, but unlike the pure potentiality of 0 degrees Cancer, which is emotionally unfettered and can be all over the place and without much structure to it, 28 degrees Cancer again has the maturity, but it's also going to be an aspect in communication with Saturn, whereas before it was acting on its own behalf without any kind of accounting for that energy. This time they're directly opposed. They're seeing each other head on. And so what does that look like, right? What does that create for us? Well, it suggests that with this new moon, with this seed, it's still in the sign of Cancer. So we're still dealing with this lunar cycle. We're still have an unfolding of our instinctual, intuitive faculties, right? But we need that. That's part of our nature as individuals, to be connected on an emotional level to reality. It helps. It gives us signals, intuition, our lunar nature, our instinctual nature. It gives us signals to navigate three dimensions, right? And to relate and to connect. This Cancerian lunar energies, it has its place. It has importance. So we're still dealing with that. But now there's a level of maturity at the 28 degrees, and now that Saturn is in our sights, the astrological advice with this opposition is to bring integrity and measure into what we express and how we express it. Because Saturn is going, it's now Saturn and the moon are being seen, okay? And so now we express within boundary, or it's to our detriment, you see. So if we, like, whereas when they were quincunx, it was expression, it was like Saturn was in the blind spot, and we weren't really seeing reality, didn't care, didn't matter. Now it does matter. Now if we express without if we express our emotions in a very Cancerian, which is a very powerful, by the way, the moon rules Cancer. When it can express in the sign of Cancer, it can be very charged energy, charged emotional energy, and it doesn't really it doesn't apologize for it, right? It just expresses it, right? And so, but now, being that it's across from Saturn with this new moon suggests during this next 2 weeks until we get to the full moon that we would be wise to be a little more considerate of the larger objective framework of 3D reality that we find ourselves in before we express, right? Keep in mind that there are realities to take into consideration. Whereas before, it may have been more about who cares? They don't apply to me. I don't care. Express. This is what's most important, my lunar nature, right? And we may have had Saturn in the blind spot. Or conversely, if we were on the Saturnian side of that energy, we may have been totally cool, totally mental, totally in our minds, with absolutely no sort of no emotional connection to any of it. And it was almost like it just, people were, people and their needs, their desires, their wants, their feelings, their more intuitive nature, just it fell flat on us if we were more on that Saturnian side. All right. So this time they're both there, and the way it can work internally, we can either be taking on one or two of these polarities again, but this time we're going to notice when we are, because we're going to see very clearly that if we're too much in one polarity, that we're denying another part of ourselves, and it's going to be made evident within us. It's also going to be seen out in the world when we are too much in one polarity. There's going to be a polarity. We're going to see two energies disconnected. But this time around, whereas before it was almost throwing up your hands and saying, there's no way for integration. These two energies are in their own bubble and they don't see each other. Now, the polarity of objective and subjective, mind, integrity, order, tradition, these are all Capricornian, Saturnian words, and emotion, family, culture, feeling, right? There's going to be, the polarity exists, but there's going to be a middle ground that we are going to be able to see. Now, this is all, the process is collective. This is a collective reading, but this is also individual. So we have a choice on individual level as to whether these energies internally, whether we are going to integrate them, right? Whether we are going to come to some amount of connection to our intuitive emotional nature, yet with a level of maturity, objectivity and consideration for larger context. Okay, that's the work with this new moon cycle. Okay, and so with the new moon, the unfolding of the new moon builds until you get to the full moon. It's going to be on August 3rd, a couple of weeks from now. And so with that, I mean, again, I'm talking about how it's be the wisdom here, the astrological advice, I guess, is to um, be very considerate of your expression at this time. That's probably how you're going to create the best outcome for yourself. Is just to put a little thought into what you express, given that Saturn's right there. Because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves on one side of the polarity and we're not going to make progress. If we want to integrate it, we have to communicate that which is dear to us, what we want, what we desire, what we feel, what we need, express our needs, yes, but with the consideration of a larger framework, a larger reality, 3D. And so with Saturn, you could be talking about taking a step back and giving it a little time. Saturn rules time. So anything considered, any emotional expression that is considered, and not just shooting from the hip and just lashing out or acting out, but actually very considered, is going to be favored at this time. It's probably going to create better results. So that's that. Now we also have we still have Mars and Mercury square to one another in the sky. They're not on the eclipse by degree, or I'm sorry, they're not on the new moon by degree. You have Mercury in early Cancer, and you have Mars in early Aries, and so they're still square, and the signs are involved. So there's still a square from Mars by sign, but it's not on the degree itself, and it's affecting Mercury. So I did another video about that, but just know that that energy is still present. That sort of heightened sensitivity. Our nervous system may be a little. We may feel like an open nerve sometimes. We may feel easily triggered. With Mars there, kind of, well, it's in square to the sign of Cancer. That's like bubbling water, right? There could be some angst bubbling up within us. All right, this is an ongoing energy. I said is going to be going on for the month of July into a little bit of August, and so just know that that's there. We're halfway through it about, so we're in the midst of that, and once we get into August, that's gonna fade a little bit. And so I do think once we get to the full moon, like right now, we're kind of, as I'm doing this reading, I'm saying, okay, measure, just be very considerate, in emotional expression, and just add a little bit more objective thought to what you express, right? Well, once we get to the full moon, it's going to be an opportunity to bust out of that a little bit, all right? Because we're going to have a full moon that is in the sign of Aquarius at 11 degrees square to Uranus in the sign of Taurus. Now, 11 degrees Aquarius, where the full moon is going to be, that's about the collective container. It's very future-oriented energy. It's very there's a lot of sort of removed objective sort of possibility and hope. It's very scientific, and it has to do with it's very utilitarian. It has to do with group container, and it's going to be going square to Uranus in the sign of Taurus, which is a little more domesticated, a little bit more fixed. But with Uranus there, it's bringing some of this sudden revolutionary kind of change to that space. And so when these two energies get together on the full moon, I do see an outlet for expression, because oppositions are about integration. They're about compromise, bringing two energies together and finding a middle ground. When we get to the square a couple of weeks from now, that's going to be different. That's going to be about using two energies that aren't necessarily seeing each other and creating a creative solution with two energies that don't necessarily understand each other, and creating, it's like 1 + 1 = 3, right? It creates the tension that can create a consequential outcome in the physical world. So I'm going to do another video about that when we get there, and I'll add more flavor to that aspect coming up on the full moon. But just know that though we may be, feeling like we're a little hemmed in with the Saturnian energy, because Saturn is about limits, right? We may be feeling a little cooler, or we may be feeling like we're receiving the cold shoulder, depending on any given moment and which sort of side of that polarity we're leaning toward. That will change, and there will be an outlet for expression at the full moon. So that's what I got. Yeah, use this energy. Use this energy to. You could say it's sort of a practice of integrity, because Saturn is going to ask that of us. It's going to ask that we express our needs and desires and what it is that we feel we need as human beings. It's going to ask us to express that in a way that has poise and integrity and accounts for what is already in place, what we have here, and what has already been built, right? Because Saturn in Aquarius, it's very much about the old guard. It's very much about what has worked in the past. It's a very nostalgic kind of energy. So just keep in mind that this is in play. And I think the path to creating a greater manifestation for ourselves, greater outcome, is, for this period of time anyway, for the next couple of weeks, is to try to integrate these energies and work with them, with what I've described. So I'll leave it at that. That's what I got. I'm going to make more videos. We've got other stuff happening in the sky, and I will get to that. I'll definitely make another video for the full moon and anything else that I see. So I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Bye-bye.